the Thing review. For my money, out of every film I've ever seen, this is my favourite. The practical effects are years ahead of their time, as was the film in general, and it's staggering to me that this film practically torpedoed Carpenter's career. The only reasoning I can find in my mind is the abundance of lead paint in Western society at the time. Despite the nonsense narrative present at the time that this was a splatterfest only focused on gore, this film excellently tells a tense and mysterious story that bubbles up in excellently chaotic scenes that keeps the audience fully engaged. The foreboding score is excellent and really adds to the horrifying elements of the film, and overall, this film is as close to perfect as it gets, and it seems, in my opinion, it's literally flawless. And that was my I Believe in Miracles review. For my money, this is the greatest sporting story in history. Not that I'm biased in any way. I'm not a massive fan of documentaries as a whole, they just aren't my cup of tea, but the pacing of this one is great. You really get a sense of how meticulously the greatest sporting side in history was put together, and how far they rose so quickly. And despite the horrors that have befallen Forest, one of the most historic clubs in global sports, it's quietly quite optimistic. It helps that this was made by people connected to the club and not connected to that salty Scotsman Graham Souness. I'm actually quite surprised he didn't crash the interview to say we'll never be in the Champions League again. Twat. Overall, this is the greatest documentary ever made about the greatest football club ever, and with absolutely no bias whatsoever, that was my Slugs review. Yes, I only watched this because of Dead Meat. However, I disagree with James saying that this film was really horny. Apart from the slugs in the bedroom butthole scene, I struggle to really see anything horny about this. I really like Dead Meat, but I do feel that they're a bit overly dramatic when it comes to nudity in films. Back to Slugs, and this is a hidden gem that more people should talk about. The practical effects are genuinely on a par with Alien, and despite the other filmmaking aspects being a bit wonky, this is a horror film that has likeable characters and a real threat, something certain modern horrors could benefit from adopting. This could have been a Stephen Moffat Doctor Who episode in the best way, because it managed to take something everyday and make it scary, and I love it for that. Also, that was my American Pie review. Meh. Maybe it's just that American style comedy doesn't gel with me, but I was expecting so much more. All my life, and I've been hearing about how this is the greatest comedy film of all time, but besides Shannon and Elizabeth, there wasn't much to see here. It wasn't a bad watch, it's a good film with some fairly funny moments, but I was never busting a gut.
Although I bet some people were busting a...
And when you're a comedy movie like this, that's more of what it has going for it. Despite all that, it's definitely still one of the best high school American comedies that I've ever seen. And that was mine. Django Unchained review. Phenomenal. Absolutely astonishing. Quentin Tarantino is a director and writer that I have mixed opinions on. I adore some of his work. I think some of it is good. And I really dislike some of it. Some of that is just descriptions of one film. And I'll let you guess which one. Back to this one though. As far as I'm concerned, this is him at his brilliant best. There are so many quotable lines, and not just the racial slurs. It's funny when it wants to be, it's constantly tense, there are legitimately surprising plot twists, but above all else that I love in this film is the finale. Django at the top of the stairs is one of my favourite scenes ever. However, overall, the film just probably misses out on my top 5 of all time, but if it does, it's knocking right on that door. And that was my Hoodwinked review. This is a film that I completely adore despite its glaring and obvious flaws. Namely, the absolutely abominable animation that's not even as good as the Asylum's modern work. But I can honestly say that it doesn't even slightly affect my enjoyment. This film is just an enjoyable fever dream at the surface level, and when you dig deeper, it just gets better. An interconnecting mystery story that's both logical and insane. I have adored this film for years, and I will always defend it. Not the sequel though, I refuse to watch that garbage. But overall, this film is fantastic and deserves a lot more recognition. If you haven't seen it, I implore you, go and seek it out if you can find it legally. And it also deserves a better sequel. But hey ho. And that was my Monsters vs. Aliens review. Despite what some people will tell you, this film is worth a watch, but only the once. A film that doesn't really deliver on its premise, it still has fun moments with a likeable cast. To be completely honest, it's rather a bland film outside of the memes though. It's really DreamWorks at their most mid, and it's interesting that this was released between Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon. Knowing that does make it seem like they spent most of their effort on those two films, whilst somewhat neglecting this one. It doesn't help that DreamWorks parody films don't have the best record, and given that it seems to have been an animation guinea pig, this is just a recipe to create a somewhat mid-film. Overall though, as I've sort of alluded to, it's a fine film that is watchable, but then there are so many films out there it just doesn't make sense to recommend this one. And that was my somewhat veering Superman review. Some absolutely phenomenal filmmaking unfortunately gets bogged down by a comparatively weaker story. The story does have some strong moments, such as Superman's first save and his interview with Lois, but some other moments that could have been great, such as Pa Kent's death in the climax, feel either rushed or unfulfilling. However, the strength of this film is that, to quote Harry Styles,
"It feels like a movie."
The sets, phenomenal. Miniatures, awesome. The score, quite possibly the best ever written for a superhero film, and it's definitely my favourite. It's right up there with... and also... it's even better than... Overall, it's clear to see the effect that this film had on literally every other superhero movie after it. It's also a film that encapsulates why people go to a movie theatre to watch films, and that was my Palm Springs review. This is a short, fun film that took advantage of one of my favourite types of story. Given that most Groundhog Day type stories only have one person in it, with this being two people, it reminded me a lot of my favourite episode of one of my favourite shows, that being the episode Window of Opportunity from Stargate SG-1. At risk of spoiling both of those films, the parallels become very evident when you watch them. The main difference is the addition of romance to Palm Springs, which really works thanks to Tracy Mosby and Jake Peralta. Sorry, I meant Andy Samberg and Kristen Milioti. They're so fun together, and so is J.K. Simmons to a lesser extent, and it's no wonder this film lulls when Milioti leaves for an extended period. Overall, it's definitely one of the better Groundhog Day films, and I'd really love to include it in a future video. It would probably be about how certain portrayals of the story became my favourite, but for now, I'll just say it's a great film, and that was my Man of Steel review. I'll be honest, I don't get the hate that this movie gets as a movie. However, I can understand if it comes from an angle that this is a bad Superman film. It feels better suited to a new character rather than Superman. On top of that, there are some strange decisions in the film. Superman killing somebody in his first appearance is almost indefensible, Pa Kent's death is comical, and the lack of colour is a strange decision that speaks to an art style that I didn't personally like. Having said that, it's an interesting film and it is very clear that Snyder had a vision that could possibly have worked. It's a shame that studio interference, tragedies and insane expectations ruined any chance of that. And his fans have made a seemingly chill guy cause chills at the mere mention of his name. Overall, it's a decent film that I will probably watch again, but it's my least favourite of the Supermans that I like. And that was my Starship Troopers review. Honestly, I'm surprised I've never reviewed this film given that it's one of my absolute favourites. At least now.
I'm doing my part.
It's a really interesting take on fascism and propaganda, as well as a myriad of other social issues that for some reason has people convinced it's not about anything but killing bugs. Yeah, an alien is just about an alien. Aside from its political commentary though, this is a really fun movie to watch. The practical effects are awesome and even the CGI is aged somewhat well, but the action is really where it shines as it really seems like a drop into hell. Makes me really enjoy playing Helldivers a lot more, to be honest.
Join the Helldivers.
I'm doing my part.
Overall, this is a stunningly good film that I'm chuffed to own on Blu-ray. And that was my short How to Train Your Dragon review. You're damn right I haven't seen that live action remake. There was absolutely no need to do that because this film still holds up. This film being animated is also central to how this film is able to be as good as it is. The colours are vibrant, the characters move swiftly but with weight, and the dragons are able to have their character perfectly displayed whilst never saying a word. By the way, it says a lot about how good the dragons in this are, considering that they were basically just cut and paste into the new film. On top of that, the music is excellent and so are the vocal performances. However, the film, probably because it's a kid film, is over very quickly and the climax feels like it's over slightly earlier than it should be. Basically, I think Toothless should have been out of Hiccup's reach for a little longer. Overall though, this is a fantastic film that reminds you of why you love cinema in general, doubly so for animation as a medium. And that was my The Nice Guys review. I was pleasantly delighted by this film. No offense to the people that I saw recommended this on Twitter, but the identity of some of the people that praised it made me believe that this film was going to be boring and unfunny. like Superbad. But unlike that film, I laughed during this one, and I did it quite a bit. Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe really bounce off each other quite well, and I really do love them together. However, special praise has to go to Angourie Rice for possessing a special quality that's rare in child actors. That is, she didn't make me want to defenestrate myself from the Burj Khalifa. She was even a good addition to the film. I was shocked. Can't help thinking the Spider-Man films would have been a little better with a little more of her. Overall, it's a very decent film that I'm definitely glad I own on Blu-ray. Made me laugh quite a lot, and I'm very happily going to watch it again. And that was my Alien review. My second favourite film of all time. Brilliantly acted, masterfully crafted, and horrifying when it intends to be. The main thing that sticks out to me though, is not the fully grown alien, but the facehugger. It's such a great design, it looks like a fleshy spider that jumps at you with one intent, to wrap itself around your throat, lay its eggs in there, and scurry away. It uses your own body against you as its lingering presence causes you some discomfort until eventually you just can't take it anymore. You're incapacitated, and then it bursts out of your chest, killing you in the process. It's terrifying, disgusting, and such a powerful allegory for sexual assault. Overall, it's a fantastic film that absolutely everyone should watch at some point in their lives, and that was my Aliens review. Aliens is a phenomenal film that for most other franchises would be the pinnacle of the series. However, despite its stellar action and interesting new characters, this is not as good as the original. It is close though, and if you prefer action to sci-fi horror, I'd understand why this is your favourite. The film looks fantastic, which is what happens when you involve motherfucking great British artists, you Yankee bastard. Pinewood Studios and Cameron had publicised disagreements and clashes on the set, but it's unnoticeable during the film. They overcame their differences to create a truly stunning film that's definitely up there with some of the greats. Overall though, whilst it is in that upper echelon of A-tier films, I would hesitate to say it's S-tier 10 out of 10, and that was my Tremors review. I'm going to be completely biased here because this is one of mine and my family's favourite movies. I love everything about this film. Kevin Bacon's performance, how the graboids look, the cast of colourful characters, the humour, and especially the finale. The film is also really good at building suspense, and when they build up to the graboids, they have some proper creepy moments. That moment where they find the guy on top of the structure having died from dehydration was so unsettling. And that's not even mentioning the car scene. The only scene that felt even slightly off is when they just find an excuse for Finn Carter to get into her underwear. Overall, I can't believe they did a movie about underground worms, and it was this fun, whilst also being great. And that was my Sand Sharks review. God bless Corin Nemec, because when he's not on screen, this is some painful garbage. I've watched more than my fair share of these types of films, but this is up there with one of the worst. Everyone, bar Nemec, gives a subpar performance, the film looks awful, and the story is just Jaws but worse. It's so bad I thought the movie was about to end an hour in, when there was still 30 fucking minutes to go. Once again, God bless Nemec. I already loved him because of his thankless role as alien knockoff Daniel Jackson in Stargate SG-1, and here he very clearly doesn't give a fuck. And it's so funny to watch. He won't stop chewing the goddamn scenery, and honestly, thank goodness he does, because if you can't tell, this movie is so boring. Overall, this dull movie is saved from complete ruin by Jonas Quinn, and for that, I cannot thank him enough. And that was my 12 Angry Men review. This film is an undeniable masterclass in engaging dialogue and blocking. I was watching this thinking that I was in for something overrated, but by the time that the knife gets brought in, I was properly hooked. It was like I was in the cinema in my own house. My attention hadn't just been grabbed, it had been snatched and centered on this film that is just people talking, because they're given some of the best dialogue put to film. Every sentence feels real, every sentence conveys emotion.
Each sentence so rife with information.
Also, they don't even need to talk at times, especially when that one guy just gets racist. Everything is said without uttering a sound. Same with how they use a person's position in the room to show them switching sides. In summary, this is an absolute barnstormer that steals your thoughts and starts provoking them. Absolutely deserving of its reputation, this is one of my favourite films of all time. And that was my The Evil Dead review. Sam Raimi really had the sauce from the beginning, huh? Despite being quite clear that the budget was mostly comprised of hopes and dreams, this is actually quite a scary film that sticks with you after you finish watching it. The Deadites are a really spooky set of antagonists, and the fact that they can use nature against you is a cool concept. Especially for a film on this lower budget, they mostly pull it off. The tree scene that causes a lot of controversy is a scene that I have my own private thoughts about that I won't fully share here because I'm not about to get cancelled. But essentially, I think it's a complex issue in film, and it is shot a little brutally. gratuitously, but it's clear to see what they were going for. Away from that, the film wastes no time in getting into the meat of the story and keeping you on the edge of your seat. Whilst we get a pretty generic antagonist, the circumstances around him ensure that the film never gets dull or even lulls. Overall though, this is a great film that's important for launching two very important careers. It's scary, thought-provoking, and fairly emotional in certain places, whilst being well acted and expertly directed. And that was my